Welcome to the Grow Your Business and Grow Your Wealth podcast with Gary Helt. Gary is an expert in helping business owners put together a plan that will provide a better future for their businesses, themselves, and their families. On the podcast, Gary interviews other professionals who share his vision, and together they share secrets and strategies any business owner can use to build a better financial foundation for your business and your life.
Hey, welcome back to the podcast. This week, my guest is Becca Pearce, and she's the president of Extend Coaching and Consulting, where she helps individuals navigate change, embrace courage, and create lives that align with the values and aspirations. A former CEO and state official, Becca's own journey was transformed by two life-altering events that challenged everything she believed about success and happiness. Drawing on over a decade of personal and professional growth, she teaches the power of vulnerability, optimism, and intentional living, encouraging others to stop waiting for someday and to start building their life that they want today. Welcome, Becca.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, give us, some of your background. Obviously, you were a state official and you did other things before you started your coaching and consulting business. So give us your background.
Yeah, so I actually spent the majority of my career in health insurance. I worked for the Blues, I worked for Kaiser Permanente. I was appointed by Governor O'Malley in the state of Maryland to implement Obamacare for the state of Maryland. Gave my heart and soul to that for 2 years, and it didn't turn on the way it was supposed to. And so I lost my job quite publicly. And fortunately landed on my feet. As a woman, this is actually a really big deal. Women don't normally land on their feet after there's such a public failure like that. But I landed on my feet at a Medicaid MCO in the state of Maryland that then got bought by a hospital system. And so I found myself as a vice president within a Maryland hospital system within, months of having lost my job publicly. So really landed on my feet again. Fast forward 14 months from losing my job, I couldn't hear out of my left ear and found out I had a brain tumor. Went in for a hearing exam and came out finding out that I had a brain tumor the size of a ping pong ball and needed surgery imminently. It was 5 weeks from the time I was diagnosed to the time that I was on the table. And the great news is it was benign and operable. This surgery was 11 years ago. Benign and operable, the best two words you can hear after you hear the word brain tumor.
Right.
And also really still a big deal. I spent the majority of 2015 learning to walk again. I am deaf in my left ear, mostly blind in my left eye. It was as if I had a stroke on the table. There was, major things going on, and I still have significant disabilities because of the surgery, not because of the brain tumor anymore. Mm-hmm. But the good news is I was able to, within about 6 months, I was able to do the job again. I was able to go back to work, and I had to prove to myself that I could do the job again. I'd been this corporate warrior for so long, and achievement was so important to me that I had to prove to myself I could do it again. And right about the time that I figured out, okay, I have this lift, like I'm back, right? Mm-hmm. Right around that time, I had a choice one day, and there was a big meeting going on at work, and it started at 8:00. But my daughter didn't get picked up by the school bus until 8:30. And it was at that moment, because at that moment I chose to go to that meeting. But the entire time I was thinking, why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? This is not what I want. I want to be able to put my daughter on the bus. I now know that's the only thing that matters to me in life, that my title doesn't matter, nothing matters anymore. And so I quit my job within that system. And to which my husband said, "You did what?" But I did that knowing that I was going to go, that I had already gone back to school to become an executive coach. So I did that knowing that I was going to become a small business owner, that I was going to enter this world of, entrepreneurial kind of spirit and build this thing. The funny thing is about it, and I apologize, this is so long, but I think it's really important. The funny thing is about it that I left my job on June 2nd, and I was sure that my business was going to be up and running by like June 17th. Like, oh, the website's going to be done. I'm going to have this. It's all going to be ready to go. And that did not happen. I firmly believe now that you need to allow yourself to get bored, like truly bored, like knocking your head on the dining room table bored, which is what happened to me before I found the passion that I needed to truly build the business. Because one of the things that I learned is that the relationship you have with yourself as a small business owner is 180 degrees from the relationship that you had with yourself in whatever career you had before. And until you give yourself that grace to recognize that, you're constantly going to be firing yourself. That little voice on the shoulder is going to tell you that you're not good enough.
Right.
So that's how I got to where I am today.
Right. So, and now that you're doing the coaching, what has, I guess, get you excited every day about continuing to do the coaching? Because, like you said, I mean, it's like um, you got to become bored to push yourself forward.
Mhm.
But what is it now that you have found that's getting you to continue pushing yourself forward and helping others?
The thing for me truly is if I have a day of 5 clients, that's the best day of my week, right? It is truly working with clients. And first and foremost, the moment that somebody doesn't have a response, I do much of my coaching on the phone. The minute somebody doesn't have a response, that the other end goes silent, is the best part of my day because I have asked them something or they have recognized something that is totally different in their life. And so that is what gets me up and going every day. Now, as a business owner, right, I just like everybody else, I've got to do the sales. We got to, there are many
Mhm.
pieces of it. And I'm also, so I've still got to run the business. Now I have support because I firmly believe that you either have an admin or you are an admin. So,
Right.
I have full support, but there's still that business owner stuff going on in the background, along with finding that space to truly be a good coach.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, you know, making that transformation lots of times is difficult, especially, if like you were, an executive, you had a big job with the state, and then you had a big job, in healthcare, and then making that change, and then now talking to people about, you know, what has happened and so forth. Because again, you're making yourself vulnerable because you're, as they say, oh, you're showing your warts, to
Mm.
someone and getting them to trust you. And I think that's something as business owners, lots of times I think people forget that we're really trying to get people to trust us. Not only our clients or customers or anything like that, but also the people that are working with us.
Mhm.
How do you help these business owners, you know, not be afraid to do that? Because I think that to me is a huge step.
And I think that really is where I lean into that vulnerability, where I now recognize that vulnerability is what actually makes you human, and it is that piece that allows people to connect with you. So prior to my surgery, I believed that, nobody's going to see any chink in my armor. Nobody's going to see me cry. Nobody's going to see me sweat, none of the above. And post surgery, there was no way to avoid the fact that I was vulnerable. And so vulnerability was forced upon me. And that's when I realized that, oh my gosh, all of these people actually like me better now, right? They actually can connect with me in a way that they couldn't connect with me before because I wouldn't show any of my armor, any chinks in my armor. And so as a business owner, I think it's very hard because you want to be able to show that you are an expert in what you do, but at the same time to get people to connect with you. So for me, when I work with business owners, to answer your question, when I work with business owners, it is really a discussion around what pieces. Vulnerability is not throwing up on somebody to make somebody feel bad for you,
Right.
right? Vulnerability, you can be vulnerable in certain areas. You can be vulnerable and say, I'm uncomfortable meeting new people. You know what? So is the other person. You can say you're vulnerable about certain things and still be an expert in what you do. So we work on that.
Right. And I think lots of times, and I think you said it, earlier, is that many times as business owners, um, you know, we're going 100 miles an hour, and you know, we don't want to show that anything can slow us down, and you know, but we don't know it all, but we got to kind of, act like we do many times.
Right. Right.
You know, how do you help them, really identify, hey, these are your weak spots, and we need to find somebody that either will work with you or get you to for those spots not to be weak. Because again, it's that vulnerability to saying, hey, we're not perfect.
And that really comes down to when I work with clients, we spend a lot of time talking about, first of all, the time value of money. And I understand that when you started your business, somebody had to empty the garbage, and that makes sense. But you need to remember to promote yourself into that leadership role. It's fine that you were all of those things in the beginning, but you've got to promote yourself up the ranks and become the CEO of your business. And as we do that, I personally help them look at what are they good at and what are they fast at. This is one of the tools. I have multiple tools, but one of the tools is the good fast quadrant. And making sure that if you're not good at it and you're slow at it, that needs to be completely outsourced to somebody else, because you are wasting your business's time and money by spending time on that. And so if you think about, how much it costs you, if, for example, bookkeeping, right?
Mhm.
This is an easy place for a lot of people. Any kind of general CPA support is usually a very good spot for people to start, because you didn't go into business to be a bookkeeper, but there are a lot of people like you, for example, that did go into business to help people do that, because that is what you do. And so if I can pay somebody else at a bookkeeper rate, and I can be focused on growing my business, what a boon for the business. So it really is helping them understand what they can completely outsource, and then what they can begin to delegate as soon as possible.
Right. Um, I guess, how do you help them also then, because we all have our achievements that we've gotten before, we've started our business, and then now that we have them, but lots of times, I'm going to say, as a business owner, we don't slow down to celebrate those achievements or the success that we've had. How do you help coach them to do that, and then also, do that with their employees?
That's a big one, because you're right. As a business owner, it seems like, first of all, being a business owner is very lonely, because who do you celebrate with? Um, and also, it is super important for you to slow down and be like, oh, I recognize that was amazing, right? Look at me go. And so what I talk about, so when I meet with my clients, because I meet with my clients once every 3 weeks or so, because 2 weeks is too hectic and once a month is too few. So it's about every 3 weeks. And when we get together, I say, what are you most proud of over the last 3 weeks? Right? To help them recognize that, oh, or, I'll check in and say, look at what you've achieved. Did you realize that you did this? And I slow down and point these things out for people, because a lot of times they don't see it for themselves.
Mhm. Yeah. What I think, I played sports growing up, into college, and we had coaches that were there to help us get better at many different things. How do you talk with the business owners to get them to understand having a coach or having someone to hold them accountable? Because again, as business owner, it's kind of like, okay, well, we're the top dog. There's nobody above us. And, we try to hold ourselves accountable, but that's not the same. So how do you get them to understand that they need a coach, they need to have somebody that's going to hold them accountable?
A lot of times people will come to me and just say, yeah, I don't know what I need. Like, I know it's just not quite working. Like, I'm stressed out. I'm not growing the business. I feel stuck. I don't know how to make a decision or when to make a decision. And then when I do, I second guess my decision. Those are the types of things that if you're saying those things to yourself, it's time to actually find somebody to support you. Because if you think about it this way, every single person in your life has a vested interest in how your business runs, all the way down to the person that you meet at the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning. Because if something changes in your business, and that changes their life in some way. A coach is the only person who my entire job is to be with you. I have no vested interest in where you go. I have no vested interest in what direction you take your business. My interest is in making sure that you're going where you want to go. And so that, I think, is the most important thing that business owners hear when they say, oh, somebody's got my back.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, when when you talk to business owners and um, you know, I'm gonna say they're spinning out of control. And lots of times as business owners we do that. How do you help them, I'm gonna say, slow down and kind of still keep everything running, but try to get them out of that spin?
Yeah, I have an example of just recently somebody called and said, my right-hand person, her operations director, who'd been with her for 15 years, just gave notice and she just was freaking out, right? Like just total. And so, one of the things that I ask is I say, okay, what do you know to be true right now? Because when you're in that spin, it's easy to get overwhelmed, but overwhelm is really just a combination of a bunch of emotions. Overwhelm is not an emotion in itself. And so what we do is we slow down and I say, okay, what's the biggest fear going on right now? I hear you. I hear it. I got it. What's going on underneath that? And we get very specific about what's going on, because if you can parse through them, what you recognize is that part of you may recognize that this actually is valuable, that she wasn't quite right for the position anyway. And so this is an opportunity, but that part's being, squashed down by all of the other fears. So we really start to parse out and figure out what's truly going on. And that is what helps people to stop spinning.
How does this bleed over into their personal life? Because many times, as a small business owner, we're going 24/7, which obviously everything has effects back and forth. Do you help them kind of divide this and make it better on both sides, or how does that work?
I call myself a personal executive coach. And I have a client who's been with me since 2018, since I first opened my doors. And she calls me her work therapist, because as a business owner, there is no separation. If you haven't created a job for yourself, a company for yourself that aligns with your values and aligns with who you are personally, then that is not going to sustain itself. And there's also a recognition. 80% of the business owners that I work with are women, but this is also true for men. At this recognition that there are times that life is going to get in the way.
Hmm.
That's part of the reason you went into business for yourself. And it's okay to just maintain while you're going through whatever you're going through. And so I personally cannot separate the work from the personal when we coach together, because it is so intertwined. There is no work-life balance. It is this integration, especially as a business owner, to recognize that sometimes work's going to win, sometimes family is going to win, and having that place to work through all of it together.
Yeah. I think so many times people talk about work-life balance and stuff, and like you said, it's integration, and that's one of the things, you know, some of the, Tony Robbins, he says that he big into, you know, you can't find that balance because it's never going to be balanced because one side or the other's always winning. But if
Mhm.
you take and you try to figure out how you can integrate the two together, then it makes it a little bit more easy to process everything, and you're not feeling that constant tug of war going on.
Right, right.
Um, obviously, tomorrow is never guaranteed, and so many times as business owners, it's, oh, we'll get to that, I'll get to that, I'll get to that, and lots of times we never get to that. How do you help them, set those goals and to get to it, get that done?
So that goes in two different directions. And the first direction is I'll start with the small level first. And so how do we focus them? You focus you on getting done what you need to get done. It really becomes kind of, okay, as a business owner, what is the most important thing for you to focus on today? Because there can only be one most important, which is people are like, but no, I've got like three things that are most important. I was like, by definition, only one of them can be most important. So let's
Right.
figure out where to focus and helping them recognize that every decision they make today impacts their long-term decision. So then we get into that long-term discussion. We're not promised tomorrow. Well, the most important thing you can be focused on from a strategic perspective is what does my legacy want to be? What am I going to regret if I don't do? Helping them understand that it is that big of a picture for you to understand where to focus. Do you really need to be reading every email that goes out of your company? Probably not.
Right.
Right? Like get yourself out of the weeds and focus on the big picture. What do you want? Why did you go into this to begin with? And how do we keep you on that track? And part of that is keeping people thinking about the fact that they have a legacy to leave. And what do you want that to be?
Right. So, we've talked a lot about I'm going to say the touchy-feely side of the business coaching. Talk a little bit more about, the other side, the financial side, and how you help people with their businesses with that too. Because I don't want this to seem like the only
Right.
thing you're talking to them about is
Right.
vulnerability in their
Right.
feelings. You're doing way more than that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I would say that the reason that people come to me for coaching, and I have a fun statistic, and that statistic is this: if you're a business owner and you stay with me for over 3 years, you have an average 266% growth from when you walked in the door with me. And part of that is because 50% of the time we are in that space where we're talking about, okay, what is the big picture? What is the strategy? Which is hard, if we talk about soft skills and hard skills,
Mhm.
right? That is hard skill kind of stuff. This is the direction that you want to take your business. We also talk about the emotion, but as a coach, I bring to the table all of the pre-surgery, drop your emotions at the door. Let's look at the bottom line. What does that impact on your business? Why did you spend that money? Where do you think you're going to get an ROI out of that? Like all of those kinds of bottom line business discussion balanced directly with, okay, why do you think you need that? Like, let's really get into the emotion and the decision making behind that. And so it's the combination of those two that I bring to the table.
Right. Now, people are going to say, I think, and I'm sure you've dealt with this many, many times, the two big objections, where am I going to find the time to be able to do this? And then how am I going to be able to afford it? So
So I
talk
think
about
it's
that.
really, yeah, so I think it's really interesting because as I was going through coaching school, and I was also a Vistage chair for a little bit, which is a program that coaches CEOs. Um, and they would always say, Vistage gives you your time back. And I would say, I don't understand that. Like, how does that work? But I have one client who said to me several weeks ago, I literally don't make a decision until I've talked it through with you because you saved me hours of thinking about it. Right. In that 1 hour that we spend together, you save me 3 to 4 hours of hemming and hawing and sending it out to people that I shouldn't be asking, all of that kind of stuff in that decision-making process as a business owner when you're alone. Going back to that, it's very lonely. Who are you going to talk to? I save people time and energy there. And also from a financial perspective, 97% of CEOs who have gone through coaching said they would repeat it. And the average return that they expect is 5.1%.
Yeah. It's it's always that's a tough threshold to cross
Yeah,
is what I always
yeah.
see. And I think again, I think many times it's having somebody hold them accountable, I think is something that lots of times, because again, like I said earlier, business owners, we hold everybody else accountable, or at least we
Hmm.
should be. Who's holding us accountable, and having a friend or a spouse or somebody like that do that isn't the same. And I think sometimes we have to, you know, as you said, earlier, it's like, hey, I had to beat my head on the table because I was so bored there for a while. So it's kind of the same thing. It's like, you have to, feel that pain kind of to be able to move forward. And how can I do that when, hey, everything's successful? How can I still, create that pain to keep pushing myself to move forward? Um, how how do you help people with that piece of it, because to me that's huge.
Yeah, and I think as you're talking, what's coming up for me is just this idea that it it's so easy as a business owner to get caught doing the things that are comfortable, doing the things that you went into business to do. But having somebody, you know, when you work with me, you have homework, right? It's strategic homework. It's thinking about where you want to go, why you did this in the first place, how you're going to get from point A to point B. When's the right person to hire somebody? It forces you to think strategically about your business in a way that you would never do on your own because A, it's not comfortable. B, you don't have time for it because you're so stuck in the things that you think are keeping you busy right now. And so it is that's the accountability. Nobody likes to show up to a session with me not having done their homework,
Right.
right? Somebody said to me, well, I did it because I did it last night. I'm like, good. I don't care when you did it. I'm glad you did it. Right?
Right. Right. um what are some areas in your coaching that you do that people wouldn't think that an executive coach is doing?
So I recently wrote a book called You Don't Have to Achieve to Be Loved. And it is partially my journey on the transition that I went through from being a corporate warrior to opening my own business. But it also lays out the change process that every single person goes through when they are making a significant change. And so we work on anytime we're working on your business, you are actually going through a significant change, whether you just started your business or you're exiting your business or anywhere in between. If you're making, you're adding a new product or you're diversifying, or maybe somebody came in and said they wanted to buy you, any of those things automatically puts you into a change process that I help people work through that they may not think that a coach is going to do, right? So I think that the other important thing is recognizing that while a consultant may tell you what to do, a coach helps you figure out what you already know. And so it is a little bit of a combination of consulting and coaching that I bring to the table, but it is truly this helping you understand where you are and how you can change your patterns to become a stronger leader, make more money, be the person you want to be.
Right. Right. Now, Becca, we talked about a lot of good stuff. What have I not asked you that you wish I had?
I think if I were to say the most important thing as a business owner is to recognize that piece that I said in the very beginning, and I'll just reiterate that, is the relationship you have with yourself as a business owner is completely different than the relationship you had with yourself ever before. And giving yourself the grace to recognize, I didn't go to school for this. I didn't, I may have gone to school for the technical part of my business, but I didn't go for to become a business owner. And so allowing yourself the grace to ask for help. I understand you might have been vice president somewhere. That's okay. You've never been a business owner before. Ask the experts the questions and allow yourself the space. We all know that there are questions out there. That's why we would do what we do. So I hope business owners would hear that it's okay to ask questions. That's why we're here.
Right. Right. So, Becca, if people like what they hear and they want to reach out to you, they want to learn more about you and your coaching, how can they do that?
The best way to find me is I have two websites, but the first one, the most important one, is moreBeccaPearce.com, because I say it that way because it's easier. And Becca Pearce is Pearce, so moreBeccaPearce.com. You can find out about all of my coaching on there. My business, the other business that I own, Extend Coach, is www.extendcoach.com. There you can find anything that you want from a small business perspective, how I help from a strategy perspective, how I run small business groups to support people, anything like that. Come in from an individual coaching perspective. If you're a partner and you're having trouble with your partner, I coach partners, that type of thing. So all of that is on extendcoach.com.
Great. Becca, I really appreciate your time today and enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.
Great. Hey, this week my guest was Becca Pearce, and she's the president of Extend Coaching and Consulting. And I'll see you guys next week.